Chengli and the Silk Road Caravan, Chapter 6. On the 5th day of the 5th month, Princess Mei Ling perched tall and straight on a clean blanket draped over El Khalid's wooden saddle. Amma had made certain that the princess honor her emperor by dressing in her most royal clothing. Her pale blue tunic and baggy trousers were covered by a long robe of green and gold silk with wide sleeves edged in a pattern of blue flowers, and on top of that came a short red and gold silk apron. A string of green jade and red rubies wound in and out of her hair, braided and piled high on top of her head, all calling attention to her status as princess from the family of the Chinese emperor. "She looks beautiful," said Chengli. "She doesn't look like a child now," fourth brother answered. "She's a true princess." Chengli's success in getting the safe conduct ticket had startled Master Feng so much that he forgot to be angry with the boys for leaving their work. He even lent the camel El Khalid to the princess and 2 donkeys to her servants for them to ride to the dunes in style. Princess Mei Ling, neglecting to thank Master Feng, ordered fourth brother and Chengli to tend the animals. Master Feng did not argue. Mei Ling's attendants scrambled to find their proper place to begin this unusual day. Chengli stood aside and watched as Amma gave orders. First came the princess. On each side of the newly royal camel rode 2 of her personal guards, with daggers shining at their waists and bows and arrows on their backs. Following behind walked fourth brother, leading the donkeys that carried the young servants, Dakshesh and Sudarshana. Amma, saying she was much too old for such things, chose to stay with the caravan. She waved Chengli to the front of the line. "Me? To the front?" With a jolt, Chengli realized that he was going along. When he had gotten permission for the princess, he had never imagined that he would be allowed to go with her. Amma again waved him forward. He grabbed El Khalid's rope and strutted out in front of the group, doing a little dance as he slid under the loop of the rope to the other side of the camel. He grinned up at the princess. He couldn't help it. He didn't even mind being her servant for a day, because what a day this promised to be. The cool morning air and the promise of food and fun set everyone, even the royal soldiers, to humming and singing tunelessly. As they reached the gathering place by the crescent lake, the sand dunes rose up like mountains in front of them, and the road disappeared from view under the dust of hundreds of donkey carts, overflowing with families headed for the celebration. The soldiers guided their small group to the sparkling blue lake and tethered the animals to the ropes provided. Already kites flew in the sky, acrobats and jugglers warmed up their acts, and under a huge canopy servants stocked banquet tables with bronze dishes, wooden platters, ceramic bowls, chopsticks, and the promise of elegant, savory foods. Princess Mei Ling stood primly, unsure where to turn or what to do. Dakshesh, Sudarshana, and fourth brother looked around eagerly, but also remained still, waiting until the princess gave orders. Chengli pointed to the distant spots of color that moved up and down on the sand dunes, people struggling up and then sliding down gleefully on the soft, silky sand. A grandmother walked by, her grandson tied snugly on her back. She noticed the children's confusion and joined them, bowing slightly to the princess. "You may climb up the dunes from wherever you like," she said. "There is no set route, and you needn't be afraid of being injured, for the sand is very soft. Watch and see. Some people go barefoot, others sit or even crawl in the hills. I think, once you get used to it, you will never want to leave." Thanking the grandmother and clearly gathering her courage, Mei Ling led her 4 attendants across the hard-packed sand to the base of the dunes, followed by 2 of her soldiers, who stood at the base of the dunes to keep a careful watch. "I don't like the sound," Mei Ling said, stopping and squinting her eyes. "The sand roars like thunder." "It's the demons." Fourth brother backed away. "I'm not going up there." "Wait," called Chengli. "You just think you hear demons. It's the sand moving. Look, when people climb on it, it makes the sand slip and roll, and that's what makes it roar. That's why it's called singing sand. Come on, let's go." Fourth brother still looked worried, but he came back and stood beside Chengli and waited until Mei Ling started up the hill of sand. "Help! Help me, I'm slipping!" Suddenly giggling, Mei Ling tried again. Up a step, slide back a step. The soft sand, tender and fine, flowed into each footprint like water flowing into a cup. Up a step, slide back with the pouring sand. Mei Ling dragged herself slowly upward, gasping for breath and laughing in between gasps. "Go faster and you won't slide back," called Dakshesh, forgetting to keep a respectful distance, and leaping up through the sand to join her. Chengli and fourth brother stumbled onto all fours and dug at the sand as they followed Dakshesh up the ridge. "I can't do it. My clothes are just too heavy." Mei Ling stopped climbing and unfastened the cord that held her red and gold apron. Sudarshana grabbed the apron. "Mistress, you can't take off your royal clothes. Not here." "I can and I will." Off came the red apron and tiny red slippers. Sudarshana's face turned pale with fright, but having no choice, she picked up the clothing, folded it neatly, and set it in a pile to mark their path up the dune. Up they went, faster now, until Mei Ling stopped again. She looked up, her voice carried plainly along the wall of sand. "Boys wear only their tunic and baggy pants. That's why they climb so fast," she said. "Princess, no!" Sudarshana pleaded. "Yes!" snapped Mei Ling. "Have you never heard of the girl Fu Hao? She lived long ago, and she rode horses and led an army. She didn't have to wear heavy silk gowns." Off came the silk brocade gown. Sudarshana picked it up and set it down in the sand. Then she looked down at her own heavy clothes and laughed. Off came her blue-striped outer tunic, which she folded and set beside the clothing of the princess. Soon Mei Ling and her servant, giggling like sisters, reached the high ridge clad only in their blue trousers and tunics. "Here's an order," Mei Ling frowned as she looked down at the piles that marked their progress up the dune. "Don't you, any of you, ever, ever tell Amma, or I'll—" Chengli winced, but fourth brother laughed. "We know," he said. "You'll chop our heads off." Mei Ling stiffened at the reference, and her eyes flashed with anger. Just as quickly, she relaxed and giggled. "Just don't tell my Amma," she repeated. Cut off from real life below, the children felt the morning slip quickly by. When Chengli turned to look over his shoulder, he saw just what the monks had told him he would. Nothing, absolutely nothing, but an endless flow of sand mountains rising and falling, reaching farther than he could see, going on forever across thousands of miles. This was the sand desert where people died. This was the desert the villagers called "Go in and you won't come out" desert. He shuddered, turned back, and looked down at the festival around Crescent Lake. Chengli longed to go down and join the excitement, but no one would go down until the princess was ready. So instead he sat on the ridge of the sand and watched people at the base of the dune coming and going. He even cheered for a passionate tug-of-war, fanning by beating, drumming, and yelling crowds. Sitting there high above the crowd, their ranks as highest and lowest, princess and servants, gradually faded, and they began sharing their true thoughts. It started when Dakshesh became brave enough to ask why the people called their country the Middle Kingdom. "It's a funny name," he said. "It's the middle of what?" Mei Ling said the ancient people didn't know about other countries, and thought they were living in the middle of the civilized world. "So ever since," she said, "Chinese people use the symbols for middle and country to mean China." "Old Cook told me," Chengli chimed in, "that people in Chang'an say it's in the middle because a person can walk 10 days in any direction and still be in China." "Ha!" Dakshesh hit the sand and sent a shower into the air. "Whoever said that didn't live out here. We've already walked out of China." Mei Ling laughed, sent a spray of sand back at him, but the question set each one thinking. Sitting beside Sudarshana, Mei Ling stared into the distance, and her face became wistful. "Sometimes I wonder how it feels, being in a family. Look at all the donkey carts down there. They are like tiny toys on a rug of sand, with children climbing in and jumping out." She stood and brushed sand off her lap. "Donkey carts are so dirty. A princess must never be dirty." She sat down again, pouting at some unspoken thought. "It didn't help me being in a family," fourth brother said. 4 boys made 1 too many for my father. He gave me to Master Fong. The Caravan is my family." Mei Ling stretched out on the warm sand, picked up handfuls, and let it sift slowly through her fingers. "I never saw my father, really. He is a cousin to the Emperor, but, you know, the Emperor has many relatives, and each has many children. My father never had time for his children, especially his daughters." Chengli listened and thought about his own father. He didn't like talking, so he poked in the sand instead. "What about the families of caravan men?" Mei Ling asked. "Some of those men are fathers, and they leave their homes for years at a time." "Are all fathers so busy they forget their children?" Dakshesh asked. "Our father brought us from India to bring gifts to the Emperor. And when he had to return suddenly," Sudarshana picked up the story, "he just left us. 'Serve the princess,' he said. 'You'll have a good life.' I wish we could find a caravan headed for India. I'd rather go home." Anger flashed across Mei Ling's face. "I'm good to you. You should be happy to—" She stopped and looked slowly from Sudarshana to Dakshesh. "Oh, I never thought. You long for your real home, just the way I long to go back to Chang'an." Chengli listened to all this talk of family, rolled over onto his stomach, and stretched across the crest of the dune. He cushioned his cheek in the sand. He blinked sand out of his eyes. He coughed sand from his throat. He fingered the pouch attached to his belt and kept silent. "A broken piece of jade," he thought. "That's all I have of my father, not even a memory." The soldiers had tried to help him that first day they arrived in Dunhuang. They'd asked him around the garrison, and had to come to tell him that some old man recognized the name of Inspector Chow Chang-wan, but that's all. No one had heard of him in years, they'd said. Not in years. They didn't even remember what he looked like. The princess laughed a coughing sort of laugh, and Cheng-Li's thoughts scattered. "Well, doesn't help to mope," Mei Ling said. "It's strange how we've changed up here. We sound like friends, talking this way." She paused and looked out across the sand dunes. "I've never had friends." She looked from Dakshesh to Sudarshana, to Cheng-Li to fourth brother, then stood up and smoothed the glistening silk of her royal bloomers. "I am a princess. I have servants. And," she added, "I now order us all to go down and be part of the celebration. Everybody up!" "Yeah, let's go!" They slid, rolled, and leaped down the long slope, picking up speed as they went. The walking turned to running, and the running turned to flying, with arms like windmills and legs thrashing. Laughing, they reached the bottom with sand in their hair, sand in their clothes, and sand flying out from between their toes. "The old grandmother was right. I don't want to stop," cried Dakshesh. "Let's go up again." So they climbed back up and slid down once, twice, 3 times, until finally exhausted, the princess announced her hunger. The girls stopped to gather up their cast-off clothing, shake the sand out of them, and dress to make themselves presentable again. The soldiers on guard stretched and grinned, happy to finally get to move on into the crowd. Then the group spent the rest of the afternoon going from stall to stall, sampling the rice cakes, bean cakes, and sticky rice candy. They watched acrobats, cheered wildly at the games of tug-of-war, lingered along the rows of stalls selling ribbons, tops, hats, dolls, even cricket cages, and then finally returned to the tables to taste delicious morsels of dried, salted squid and baby octopus. As the sun slid down the sky to touch the top of the sand mountains, Mei Ling looked at each companion and shook her head. When she spoke, she was princess once again. "Fourth brother and skinny one, go tell the royal soldiers that we are ready to return." Cheng-Li followed fourth brother to the small lake, where people continued to enjoy the leftover food still spread beneath the colorful canopy. Fourth brother called out, "Skinny one, go ahead without me. I'll be there in a minute." He swerved through the crowd of well-dressed families and pushed past them into the cluster of animal tenders. Curious, Cheng-Li followed. Fourth brother began gesturing excitedly as a crowd gathered around him. Cheng-Li watched him hold out a small box and open it. The crowd sucked in an appreciative breath. Cheng-Li pushed in closer to get a look. "Ah, you can't sell that!" He elbowed his way through the crowd and grabbed at fourth brother. In the same breath, the man standing around him yelled, "Thief! Thief!" and yanked him away. "No!" Cheng-Li called out as he struggled to get out of their grasp. "Not me! Him! That's Master Fong's inkstone!" The men shoved Cheng-Li back to the ground and stepped over him to get a better look at fourth brother's treasure. "Get away, boy!" ordered one of the men. "But he stole it, he—" "Shut your mouth!" fourth brother muttered, his voice hard and mean. "I found it in the sand, not in his bedroll. Not on his donkey. In the sand. It could be anybody's, and now it's mine." Ignoring Cheng-Li, he bartered skillfully, the box quickly sold, and the men drifted away. The money went into fourth brother's pouch. "There, now you've seen it. I told you I'd get back at Master for breaking his promise to me." "But you're a thief!" Cheng-Li protested. "What's it to you? You've been stealing all along." "Never from a friend, never from you." Fourth brother grinned, with his voice softened. "You should join me." He opened his arms in a welcoming gesture. Cheng-Li pulled back, startled. "No, really, I can teach you," said fourth brother. "You'll never get caught. You'll make more money than your tiny caravan wage, I promise you that. You could be a professional. You look so innocent." "I don't think so." Cheng-Li thought of his poor wages and wavered. "It would be great to have good food to eat and money to buy things at the bazaar, but—" He thought of the father he had never known. "My father was an inspector. He was honest. Old Cook said so, and I'm his son." He turned away, his hand fingering the jade tied to his belt. "I will honor his spirit." "No one will know." Fourth brother laughed and placed his arm around Cheng-Li's shoulder. "You tell anybody what you just saw, and you won't have to worry about your father's spirit. I will haunt you myself for the rest of your life." He grinned innocently, moving his hands like a snake charmer's in front of Cheng-Li, making the younger boy think of 2 floating ghost tendrils. "Join me. Join me. I will not." "All right, have it your way. But you tell anybody about me, then I'll wring your scrawny neck." The smile slid from fourth brother's face. Cheng-Li stood still as reality sank in. "You took Master Fong's jacket, didn't you? The scorpion jacket. The one that protects him on the desert. You're nothing but a smuggler. You son of scorpions." Fourth brother stepped in front of Cheng-Li, his ghost tendril hands clenched into fists. His eyes narrowed and glistened like a snake about to strike. "Tell, and you're dead, O innocent one." He turned away abruptly and walked off into the crowd.